This is the tutorial for Chapter 4, Section 2, Solving Proportions. Let's take a look at the first type of problem we'll end up seeing today. And it asks us to tell whether the ratios are proportional. There's a couple different ways to do this, but one way is to use cross products. And so that's what we're going to end up doing today. So cross products is when we go ahead and multiply the numbers that are diagonal from one another. So I'm going to multiply the 10 and the 38. So I'll do 10 times 38. Now we can only do this when we have a proportion. And we're going to set it equal to the cross products of 32 and 16. So we go ahead and multiply out these numbers. 10 times 38 makes 380. And I do the work over here. 32 times 16 makes 512. So I see that these two are not equal, so they're not proportional. So since the cross products are not, let's say even since cross products are not equal, therefore not proportional. And so that would be our phrase that we could use if we were going to explain why they're not proportional or why they are proportional. So let's take a look at the next one. So we're going to multiply the 20 and the 90, and we're going to set that equal to 36 times by 50. So we go ahead and multiply the 20 and the 90, and we end up with 1800. Well, 36 times 50 gives me the same answer, 1800. So these are proportional. So we could say our little phrase might be, since the cross products are equal, then the fractions are proportional. Well, let's take a look at the last one here. Again, if we do the cross products, 20 times by 36, we set that equal to 28 times by 28. So 20 times 36 gives me 720. 28 times 28 is pretty close to that, but not exactly the same. And since they're not the same, they're not proportional. So again, if it asks you for a statement of why, or tell whether they are, or explain, this would be the phrase that you'd end up wanting to use, whether they're not proportional or whether they are proportional. So the next problem asks us to solve. It says Jan bought 4 stamps for $1.48 at this rate. So when they say at this rate, that means we're going to set up a proportion. And so our rate is this: 4 stamps costs $1.48. Now notice I use the units in there, and I'm putting the units in there so I can get my proportion correct. Because then it says, at this rate, how much would 10 stamps cost? They want to know the cost. We don't know what that cost is. So X is our cost, our unknown that we're looking for. Notice X is the dollar amount, because that's what they're asking for. 10 stamps would have to go on top because I need the proportion to be equivalent. And that means I need the units in the same spot. Now, it doesn't matter whether I put the stamps on top or the dollars on the bottom, as long as I'm consistent. So that if I do it this way, I need to make sure that the proportion and other fractions exactly the same way, set up where stamps are on top, dollars are on the bottom. So now I'm ready to solve. So I'm going to go ahead and cross multiply. Now when I do that, I'm just doing 4 times x is 4x. And then I'm doing $1.48 times by 10. So now I've got 4x equals 1480. So I go ahead and do the division. 4 divided by 4. So x equals, 4 goes into 14. We have 3 times. So let me do this division off to the side here. 4 goes into 14 3 times. Leaves us with 2 left over. Make sure you bring that decimal point straight up. Bring the 8 down. 4 goes into 28 7 times, so it's 3.7. So let's go back to the question and see what it asked for. How much would 10 stamps cost? So we could say 10 stamps cost $3.70. So always want to rephrase that question as a statement, and that would be our answer. Let's take a look at the next problem. And so we have number 5. It says Al has 10 dogs, 15 cats, and he receives 5 more dogs and 10 more cats. Did the ratio of dogs to cats stay the same? So let's start with the original, 10 dogs for 15 cats. Notice I put the units in there. I need to put the units so that I make sure I set up the other fraction exactly the same, the other ratio the same. So I'm going to put dogs on top. So he starts off with 10, but then he adds 5 more. So I'm going to have those, and I need to add them together, and those are dogs. And then he adds 10 more cats, but he already had 15. So we'll start with 15, and he adds 10 more. And again, those were cats. And so now we're ready to add those two numbers together, and we end up with, now I'll go ahead and leave off the units now since I've got my proportions set up correctly, where I've got dogs on top, cats on the bottom, and I'll go ahead and add these numbers, and I end up with 15 over 25. So I can go ahead and use cross products now to see if this is proportional. So 10 times 25, and set that equal to 15 times by 15. So I do that work, I get 250, is what I get when I multiply the 10 by 25. 15 times 15 makes 225, and those do not equal. So what we can say is the ratios were not equivalent. Therefore, the ratios of dogs to cats did not stay the same. So the ratios were not equivalent because the cross products were not the same. Let's state that, because the ratios were not equivalent because the cross products were not equal. And so that's why the ratio of cats to dogs did not stay the same. So it talks about how on a field trip, the ratio of teachers to students must be 2 to 9. Now notice they have a different formation of this ratio here. They're using a colon. They could say 2 to 9, or we could even use the fraction, 2 to 9. Now notice it doesn't specify the units, but they do tell us the units here. Notice it says teachers to students. So the first number, the 2, represents the teachers, where the students represents the 9. So I'm going to write that out. 2 teachers to 9 students. And it's always important to write out the units to start with so we make sure we set up the next ratio exactly the same. So it says if there are 81 students on the field trip, how many teachers must there be? Well, we're looking for teachers, so that is our x value, and teachers needs to go on top because that's how I set up the fraction. 81 students would go in the denominator. So now we're ready to solve, and we're going to use cross products again. So I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 81, so 2 times 81, and I'm setting that equal to 9 times x, 9x. So 2 times 81 gives me 162 equals 9x. And then I can go ahead and do that division, divide by 9. And when I do that division, I end up with 18. 18 equals x. So what we would say is, for 81 students, there must be 18 teachers. And that would be our answer. So those are the types of problems that we're going to end up seeing on tonight's homework. Good luck.